Regressive leftists are self-proclaimed liberals who abandon liberal principles by tolerating and defending non-liberal ideologies. When right-wing Christian fundamentalists like the Westboro Baptist Church espouse hatred for gays, adulterers, and anyone who rejects their God, progressives react with scorn. They chastise such beliefs for being outdated, intolerant, and dangerous, and rightly so. Yet when Muslims espouse the very same beliefs, self-proclaimed liberals suddenly lose all their liberal convictions and either remain silent or viciously attack critics of Islam. They contradict their own liberal values by acting as apologists for illiberal ideas. Remember, polls show that the clear majority of Muslims in numerous Middle Eastern countries support stoning women to death and killing people who leave the religion of Islam. Last time I checked, those weren't liberal principles.
Oh, that's their culture, you have to respect it.
That's right. Yeah. That's what they say. It's just insane.
Yes, it's just the one exception, liberal about everything else, but then this one exception, it's their culture. Well, to hell with their culture.
So why do self-proclaimed liberals act as apologists for the illiberal religion of Islam? Let's take a look at a few examples. The left-wing group Hope Not Hate, which describes itself as anti-fascist, recently compiled a list of anti-Muslim bigots. This list of anti-Muslim bigots included Raquel Saraswati, a headscarf-wearing devout Muslim who campaigns against honor violence. In Pakistan alone, 1,000 women are executed every single year for honor crimes that include wearing jeans, looking at a man twice, or singing. So this left-wing, supposedly anti-bigotry organisation actually listed a devout Muslim as an anti-Muslim bigot simply for drawing attention to this. The list also included Ayan Hirsi Ali, an ex-Muslim who has dedicated her life to pushing for a reform of Islam to make it more tolerant and more in line with liberal principles. Hirsi Ali had previously appeared on another list, that of Islamist jihadists who murdered her colleague on the streets of Amsterdam in 2004 and promised that she was next. Hope Not Hate says its goal is to, quote, undermine groups that preach hate, intolerance and division. But in smearing these people amongst numerous other reformists, they are supporting a belief system which promotes hate, intolerance and division. This flagrant hypocrisy is a defining characteristic of the regressive left.
Okay, but think about
and you don't do it by saying to them Muslims are bad.
But you're not saying Muslims are bad.
Right.
You are saying that.
We're saying the ideas need to be changed.
You're saying their ideas are bad?
Killing women for being raped, I would say, is a bad idea. Yeah, I do. Hang me for it.
And given that leftist groups have aligned philosophically with Islamists in identifying reformists and critics of Islam as the enemy, it's unsurprising that jihadists see this as an opportunity. In its recent manifesto, ISIS discussed how their operatives in Europe would seek to recruit, radicalize and arm left-wing activists because they broadly share the same political goals. So you've got adherents of ISIS, which promotes the most intolerant, hateful and violent belief system, actually reaching out to leftists because they see them as philosophical bedfellows. Glenn Greenwald is another example of a regressive leftist. After doing sterling work exposing NSA surveillance via the Edward Snowden leaks, Greenwald now appears to spend most of his time trying to smear the new atheists, most recently Richard Dawkins, because they're critical of Islam, despite the fact that Greenwald, as a gay man, would be executed in many Muslim countries. Despite claiming that he's a champion of free speech, Greenwald responded to the jihadist slaughter of Charlie Hebdo cartoonists and staff by attacking the publication itself, labelling it offensive and bigoted towards Muslims. Even though Charlie Hebdo was notorious for its eagerness to offend both Jews and Christians in equal measure. In a Twitter exchange with me, Greenwald suggested that his love of free speech was so strident that he would even defend Nazis. But when I challenged him to defend Donald Trump's free speech rights after his controversial comments on Muslim immigration, Greenwald went completely silent. Regressive leftists are only prepared to defend the free speech rights of those with whom they agree. Given the choice between being politically correct or standing by their principles, regressive leftists will choose the former every single time. But Greenwald doubled down on his regressivism, later retweeting an ISIS supporter who once advocated killing homosexuals to endorse his argument during an exchange with Maajid Nawaz. This is a defining characteristic of the regressive left. They will even side with people who would literally execute them in cold blood rather than criticize the intolerant aspects of Islam. Then we have another example of a regressive leftist. Former Russia Today host Abby Martin, who now presents a show on a network funded by Venezuela's communist government. When I drew attention to Martin's ludicrous suggestion that the San Bernardino attacks had nothing to do with Islam, labeling her a regressive leftist, Martin shot back by claiming that anyone who used the term regressive left was merely covering for their, quote, irrational fear of Muslims. Unfortunately for Abby, the term regressive left was coined by Maajid Nawaz, a Muslim. You realise you just epitomised the very reason I coined the term. Yours, a Muslim, responded Nawaz. In addition, Martin's claim that people like me who use the term regressive left are just absolving their support for the empire is completely debunked by the fact that I've opposed every single war in the Middle East. So again, Martin exhibited one of the defining characteristics of the regressive left. Immediately play the Islamophobia card when you're called out on your hypocrisy. But in reacting with such vitriol against anyone who criticizes the intolerant aspects of Islam, regressive leftists are themselves engaging in a form of bigotry. The bigotry of low expectations, offering themselves up as human shields to defend Islam because of the assumption that Muslims are somehow incapable of handling criticism or debate without becoming violent or feeling persecuted. The regressive left has also formed an unspoken alliance with anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists who claim that every single act of Islamist terror is staged by the CIA or Mossad. Muslim immigrants living in the West also routinely spout the same conspiracies to try and absolve Islam of blame.
Les Juifs, t'es raciste, les Juifs.
Vous êtes sérieuse?
Oui, sérieuse, oui. Ici en Paris, c'est pas musulman.
While governments have staged individual acts of false flag terror throughout history, to claim that every Muslim massacre is the work of US or Israeli intelligence is both lazy and an intellectually dishonest ploy to make excuses for violent Islamism. This again underscores why so many on the left will resort to unprecedented levels of self-delusion so long as it allows them to stick their heads in the sand and deny that there's a problem with Islam.
The fact of the matter is that you either oppose religious dictatorship and its terrorist surrogates everywhere, without distinction, whether it's messianic settlers on the West Bank or Christian nutbags trying to teach us that we trod the earth the same time as the dinosaurs, or the forces of jihad. You either oppose this kind of thing root and branch or you don't. And I'm sorry to say that the anti-war left has failed the test. It has made excuses for our totalitarian and theocratic enemies.
Another hotbed of leftist regressivism can be found amongst Western feminists. While screeching endlessly about a college rape culture that doesn't exist, feminists have been completely silent on the very real rape culture that the West is importing. Muslim migrants pouring into European countries are used to treating women as second-class citizens because Islam is a highly misogynistic and patriarchal religion. That's why rapes and sexual assaults of women in and around migrant camps are exploding. But instead of drawing attention to the need to stem the tide, or in the very least assimilate these migrants into embracing and adopting Western values on how to treat women, what do we hear from feminists? They're too busy whining about the evils of sexist air conditioning, being triggered by clapping, and beach body advertisements. Listen, it comes down to this. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a liberal. The fact that you constantly defend, make excuses for, and refuse to critique the most illiberal doctrine on the planet, Islam, proves that you're not a liberal. You're a regressive leftist who is perfectly willing to betray your supposedly ardent principles in a heartbeat rather than dare to offend a minority group, even when that minority group holds beliefs that are flagrantly bigoted, extremist, and completely contradictory to true liberal values. And here's why it matters. The almost complete absence of powerful voices on the left to denounce the intolerant aspects of Islam has created a vacuum. That vacuum has been filled by actual extremists, racists, and Islamophobes on the far right. The regressive left's failure to criticize Islam has amplified the voices of neo-Nazis, Christian fundamentalists, white supremacists, and actual bigots who just hate Muslims. That polarization has in turn attracted more Muslims to the extremist message of Islamists. So in failing to stand up for liberal principles, regressive leftists have ensured that the dialogue will continue to be dominated by extremists on both sides. Regressive leftists are trying to strangle moderate voices by denouncing them as intolerant bigots, while condoning the actual intolerance implicit within Islam. This will lead to a less tolerant society, resulting in more hatred, more racism, more polarization, more clampdowns on free speech, and less secular liberalism.